YouTube, what is going on? Heir of Carthage here, back in Total War Warhammer 2, and we are still in the Changelings Challenge Tournament. This is the finals between Felkon and Xiphos, and this is going to be the Dark Elves of Xiphos being led against the Empire led by Felkon. So, boy, I know for one that I know about the Wood Elves, and I'm sure that he's just as good with Dark Elves. Xiphos is a very good player in general, but I've seen him do a lot of play with the Elves when he's sent me replays, and I love his play with the Wood Elf faction, so I'm curious to see what he does with the Dark Elves. Dark Elves are probably one of my most comfortable factions, too, and I really like the pick that he's made here. He's got 2 Sisters of Slaughter, and these sisters will slaughter state troops if they're given the opportunity. He's got 1 Witch Elf, and this is the Sisters of the Singing Doom Witch Elves. So an interesting pick here with them. The Sisters of the Singing Doom could be used to berserk a key target like a cavalry unit or a lord or hero. There are 2 Cold One Knights. These are very capable anti-large cavalry. And then Slaaneash's Harvesters, which is a Doomfire Warlock Regiment of Renown that comes with Soul Stealer and Word of Pain. Now, Soul Stealer is going to allow them to replenish a little bit of their hit points by stealing it from an enemy unit, so that could be an interesting one to see. And then Word of Pain is a massive melee attack debuff. It also debuffs accuracy, but melee attack, I would assume, is what it's going to get used for, and it lasts for 40 seconds. That could be used to help Morathi. Now, Morathi's debuffs, she has 2 that's available to her. Only 1 is present right now. Morathi only has the Enchanting Beauty. She does not have Heartrender and Dark Sword. So she's taking away 9 melee attack and 8% of the charge bonus. She's got Melkoth's Miasma and Soul Stealer herself. So 2 Soul Stealers. There are some Dark Riders with repeater crossbows, 1 Reaper Bolt Thrower, 4 Spearmen, and then, like I mentioned earlier, the 2 sisters, or sorry, there's 2 Dark Riders with crossbows. Now, the Empire is going to have 3 Empire Knights in total. That's a lot of cavalry for those Cold One Knights to contend with, and the Royal Altdorf Gryphites. So that is 4 heavy cavalry on the battlefield, 2 missile cavalry here from Felkon with the Outriders. Anytime you see Karl Franz, just start looking for the Jade Wizard, and there he is. You can see the Jade Wizard coming with the standard spells that you would expect, which is going to be Regrowth, which now actually buffs the, what do you call it, the crap, the Fatigue. I know it's not called Fatigue on this game. Is it Fatigue? Yeah, whatever it is, it boosts the fatigue. I'll remember the word for it here in a minute. In fact, I'm just going to hit the spell because now I'm mad at myself for not being able to remember what they call it on here. Vigor! That's what I was looking for. So it replenishes the vigor of whatever you cast it on. It no longer gives them physical resistance. There is a Hammer of Witches amongst the 5 Spearmen, and that is cheap infantry, but it's meant to be cheap because all of the money of this Empire army is poured into the support troops because the Empire excels with support troops. That's where their strength is. Now, the artillery duel is going to be critical here. An Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower is pretty good if it's in range, but it's not, which means the Hammer of Witches is going to open fire first. And it's really going to be a matter of kind of what happens with that artillery duel. Morathi has the speed advantage over Franz. Oh, but she stumbles into those Outriders and takes a lot of damage early. That hurts bad. The repeater crossbows are going to come in to help do some work. The Hammer of Witches is getting some nice work done early. It's now within range of the Reaper Bolt Thrower. But the Reaper already lost one of its artillery pieces, so it's down to 2 bolts, which means that the artillery duel is probably going to favor the Empire. We'll see, though. We'll see. Alright, so these crossbows just got shot up bad by the Outriders, too. I think there's a bit of a range advantage. And the projectile trajectories and stuff are going to be good for the Outriders here, too. I think if they get close and stay in combat long, though, the Dark Riders would do a lot of damage. But, yeah, I mean, you can see that they do. But they're outnumbered 2-1 here. The Empire Knights take a little damage and then have to retreat. The artillery duel looks like it is clearly going to favor the Hammer of Witches, which is going to create a tough situation for the Elves. Karl Franz keeping an eye on Morathi. And honestly, without that second debuff, unless we see like a Word of Pain, I don't know that Morathi could withstand Karl for long. The Empire Knight here is going to get a Melkoth's Miasma right before engaging, and the Sisters of Slaughter are going to come in for support. And with Morathi hovering right overhead, it's going to debuff the attack on these units quite a bit. Karl's going to dip in here in the middle to try and take out Slaaneash's Harvesters. They were terrified out, and I think their Soul Stealer gets wasted. However, the Sisters of the Singing Doom are here, and if they could Berserk a bunch of these units, that would be huge. One of them does Berserk. Sigmar's Sons. Let's see if anything else. Another Berserks, the Empire Knights. But Karl and the other Empire Knight managed to get out. But still, that's going to be a great engagement for the Sisters of the Singing Doom. One Spearman's pushing through. Slaaneash's Harvesters come back. There's a Soul Steal over here from Morathi. So she's going to be regaining some precious hit points. And over here, a very nice engagement for Xiphos. And that Sisters of the Singing Doom just ruined a lot of troops. And with Karl back down here again, right amongst the Sisters of the Singing Doom, they're going to get charged hard by all this cavalry. Let's see if anything else berserks while it's... Oh my goodness, another Empire Knight berserks. The repeater crossbow is just parked there, dishing out the damage. One Spearman is going to make a run for the Hammer of Witches, but the Hammer of Witches should stay safe. The Slaaneash's Harvesters managed to come back, but I think they've utilized their spell already. I thought I heard their spell go off at the last second earlier, but I think it was negated when they routed. So Morathi manages to help deal with the Royal Altdorf Griffites. There is a regrouped Empire Knight, and Karl is on the way over here, but I mean, there's a lot of support here. Morathi's got the support of these Sisters of Slaughter. I think this is going to be a tricky fight for Karl, but the Outriders are there to support too, so we'll see. And the Jade Wizard's there to support with a regrowth. Or no, it's an Earthblood. Morathi gets the heck out of dodge. I think she's going to look for a better engagement. No, she dove right back in. I think she's trying to pin Karl. Get him with the Knights while the Sisters of Slaughter are now free to push away these Outriders. This is looking great for the Dark Elves right now. Those Sisters of the Singing Doom caused some tremendous damage in the center by berserking all those Empire Knights, and they darn near got Karl. Yeah, Karl is toast. He's pinned by these Cold One Knights and Morathi, and even without the second debuff, he's just in over his head right now. So that's going to be the end of Karl. Morathi can escort him completely off the battlefield, so the Empire, I think, is toast here. So Felkon's Empire army, I think it's a good pick. And he even had some, I thought he had some pretty decent initial engagement there with his artillery starting to win the duel. He had a good engagement with those Outriders going on. But he's going to go ahead and admit defeat, and he is defeated at this point. Wow, what a play by Xiphos. Great play. Great play indeed. From both players, of course. But yeah, I mean, fantastic play by Xiphos. Really enjoyed that. That was really good. So I told you he was dangerous with Elves. I knew for a fact Wood Elves, and he was dangerous here. And honestly, I mean, Dark Elves with Morathi and a good pick, they are a tough faction. They are a tough faction because they have a pretty good answer to everything out there. And that's one of the reasons why the Dark Elves are such a dangerous faction. They have anti-large, they have AP missiles, they have speed, they have artillery, they've got a lord like Morathi who doubles as a spellcaster and anti-large and a debuff. I mean, they have capable anti-infantry in the form of these Sisters of Slaughter who didn't even end up having to do that much work. In the end, the state troops just got mulched in a couple of different engagements. Dread Spears are a decent pick against state troops because they have pretty solid melee defense. I mean, these Cold One Knights are always a solid pick against the Empire as they trade pretty cost effectively with any of the Empire cavalry, up to and including Demigryph Knights with halberds. Slaaneash's Harvesters is an expensive pick, but I can see how this thing might pay off. If the Empire somehow loses the ability to counter it, it's a very fast-moving light cavalry that makes mincemeat of light infantry and light skirmishers if it gets a hold of them. And with the Soul Stealer, that makes a lot of sense. It can heal itself a bit. But then the Word of Pain is honestly a pretty good way to potentially keep your Lord or another key unit safe from an enemy unit that might otherwise be about to win an engagement because it takes away 44 melee attack. Just brutal, and it lasts for 40 seconds. Sisters of the Singing Doom, again, very well used here. I like the pick. from Felkon. 4 heavy cavalry. He knows that he knows darn well that the Dark Elves are likely to bring something like Cold Knights, so he brings a lot of this cavalry in an attempt to try and make it difficult for the Dark Elves to deal with. He also brought the Outriders, which is a great way to try and balance these Dark Riders with repeater crossbows. And then the Hammer of Witches, I mean, it's just a good cannon. It causes a lot of damage against large targets. It's got good range, and you saw there how it was able to defeat the Reaper Bolt Thrower in that artillery duel. State troops, because what else? I mean, you can't afford to bring expensive infantry against the the Dark Elves, and then they might get mulched anyway if the Dark Elves show up with executioners. So definitely like the idea that you're not really going to put a bunch of focus on heavy infantry here with the Empire. So again, I don't know what to bring better in these builds. I would struggle with the matchup against the Dark Elves with the Empire as well, because the Dark Elves are just a solid faction. They can answer anything you can bring. Now, the Empire is a jack of all trades. They can do a little bit of everything themselves, but like I said, the Dark Elves are a tough one. They've got monsters on top of it, whereas the Empire doesn't really have that unless you bring it with your Lord. They've got Hydras. They've got, oh crap, I'm going to forget the name of them here real quick. Those Charybdis. They've got Hydras, they've got Charybdis, they've got Harpies, they've got decent cavalry, they've got good anti-light infantry, which means your state troops are going to be in trouble, and they've got good anti-heavy infantry. So they've got specialty anti-large infantry with the Black Guard of Nagaron, and they've got access to dark lore, death lore, fire lore. I can't remember if they have metal. I'm going to forget that one. Shadow lore. Yeah, so they've got access to a lot of good stuff. Really, the only thing that the Dark Elves don't have is like a healing caster. The only way they have it is with Soul Stealer. So, I don't know. That's really the only place where the Dark Elves might be a little bit lacking is in terms of healing. But if they had healing, the Dark Elves would just be insane. Insane. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed this one. Thanks again to Xiphos and Felkon. It is now 1-1 in a best-of-5 final match in the Changelings Challenge tournament that was hosted by Halo. I appreciate Halo sending this in. Thank you to both players for giving us an entertaining game. And guess what, folks? There'll be more, so stay tuned.